speak most about roos because at a landscape scale, they're probably the biggest issue in terms of your unplanned grazing on a property. I'll flick straight through, running a bit short on time, but essentially I've got a little case study and it's at a very different scale to most of what you guys will be farming at. It's at a microscopic scale, but the take-home message from it is essentially the same. We've got a little property here up near Woodside, and the owners are going through an exercise of planting their DSE for the property, as you guys would do on hundreds or thousands of hectares as opposed to about 12 or 15. And the numbers there are very conservative, especially given the rainfall they've got up there. But essentially they worked out they wanted to run about 60 DSE, and part of that was the issues they had with soil erosion. They wanted to keep a lot of ground cover. Acidic hill soil was prone to tunnel erosion. So they worked out how they were going to do that. They had 2 horses, which are always good for chewing up a lot of grass, and they wanted to run just a few cattle to fatten. Now, plus or minus very rough numbers, but 4 cattle, 2 horses, they've already used up their DSE for the property. Now, the reality is, the part of the landscape they're in, they could regularly add 25 Western greys to the property. Now, it's not all the time, they're moving in, they're moving out. They could also add a couple of rabbit warrens, add a fraction of a DSE per rabbit, and then, depending on where they are and how much scrub's around, they can add a few fallow deer. Now, suddenly they've taken it up to almost 90 DSE, so they've had a 50% DSE increase, and they're not getting a return from any of that extra grazing, and they're not actually necessarily able to manage it that easily.
They're hungry, they are.
Yeah, exactly.
Buy a freezer.
Yep. Yep. So, for I guess for most of you guys, it'll depend whether you kind of back into some hill country a bit, and those who are have a bit more hill country are probably going to see a lot more roos than those that are right out on the flats. But the big issue will be how many, generally speaking, is how many roos you're going to have coming in and how much of their grass, how much of your grass they're chewing up. So you've got a few options. You can either try and remove the animals that are eating the grass that you want for your stock, or getting into your crops. And I guess the big issues are, particularly with deer and with roos, they don't really respect fences. So any areas that you're trying to rotationally graze or lock up, they'll get into them ahead of the stock and take your high value feed. And then your other options are to improve your available feed. Now, for most of you guys, competent commercial farmers, you're already taking the bulk of the steps that you can to improve the feed that you've got on offer. The mid-north Western greys are most numerous, depending on where you are. You might get a few reds pushing up off the Murray Flats if you're back into the hills a bit, and you might get a few Euros kicking around. With all of the grass that we've started growing, the water that's in the landscape, and the smaller areas of thick vegetation, and also the removal of apex predators, kangaroos have done extremely well. They've also got a really well adapted reproductive strategy. So the numbers have essentially been on the up and up, and people have really started to notice, I think, over the last 5 to 10 years. That has come back a little bit, probably from the upper mid-north into the pastoral zone with drought. But in the areas that most of you guys are farming, certainly south into the Mount Lofty ranges, where we're in pretty good country, the conditions haven't been severe enough to kind of have the large dieback in the root population that they've had further north. So the numbers continue to increase. The numbers in the literature vary a little bit, but you can really, for your sums, you could roughly average it out at 0.5 DSE per root. So if you've got a few hundred wandering around on your property, that starts to have a relatively major impact. They're in rotational grazing, they get ahead of your flock. Despite the fact that they can clear fences quite happily, they have a habit of pushing under them instead, which further ruins your rotational grazing because then your sheep start using those same holes. I've seen plenty of properties further south on the Flurio where they've just stopped grazing sheep because they can't keep sheep-proof fences, so they just move to cattle and run single strand wire rather than the mesh, and if you've got any native veg on the property, or if you're trying to re-veg, then you end up with a whole lot of trees that are pruned back down into tree guards, or the kind of ground layer of any of your scrub eaten out. Also, occasionally you get personal safety issues, so traffic collisions being one of the major ones, but if you get a grumpy old buck, usually it's the old bucks as they kind of get towards the end of their life, they're malnourished, and they get pretty territorial, and sometimes they have a go. So what are your management options? If you've got really high value crops, and it might not apply so much to you guys, but if anyone's growing irrigated lucerne, for instance, a lot of growers are starting to find that it's worth the cost to actually fence, so rue or deer-proof fence irrigated lucerne, and they're looking at a period of maybe 10 years to recoup the investment in that fencing, because in some areas production losses are so major. The kind of probably go-to option for a lot of people would be to get a destruction permit, and we do realise that sometimes a bit of kangaroo control happens without a destruction permit, but we would urge you to go through the permit process, particularly because as of 1 July, we are told there may be a few teething issues, but as of 1 July, the permit process will get a whole lot easier. There's a new permit system coming online. You should be able to do it online rather than write out a paper application, scan it, or send it in the post. Any Department for Environment and Water rangers who are authorised as wardens under the National Parks and Wildlife Act. Previously, they could only give you a permit for up to 50 western greys, and if you wanted more, you had to go higher up the system. It'd take longer. You'd have to delay getting your permit back. That's now been increased to 200. And 200 isn't an annual cap, that's just the number you can get in a permit. So you can roll a permit over, and if you can demonstrate that you're still, you shot 200 and you're still having impacts from roos, then there's no reason you won't get another permit as soon as you return the previous one. So those are small changes that make life a little bit easier. The big thing that's happening at the moment, and I encourage you to feed back into it if you've got time. So there's the Your Say website, which is how the state government gets a lot of community feedback on different issues. Partly because of the drought year that we've had, they've looked at revising commercial harvest of kangaroos in South Australia well ahead of the normal. So normally that plan ticks over every 4 to 5 years. I think we've only actually had the current plan for a year, and they've already looked at some major revisions to it to expand the commercial harvest zones. So previously, commercial harvest in this sort of area was limited to probably essentially the far north of the north. They're looking at expanding that right down. And I haven't zoomed in on the map, but we might be almost coming as far back as Roseworthy for commercial harvest. Now, that doesn't mean it's practical everywhere, but for those who have a lot of roos and are back in the hill country, it might present an extra option.
When you say coming soon?
It's up for consultation at the moment.
Yeah.
So you can jump on the Your Say website.
So I've got a permit, and
Yep.
I am a bit hesitant because I would rather the meat be used. Like, the dog can only eat so much.
Yeah. Yep. So this is a really big change. So the commercial harvest zones in South Australia have been static for a really long time. And there's a whole lot of, it's not just a matter of the government changing the restrictions, it's a matter of industry actually taking up the new options that are available, and landholders in the industry making those connections. But at this stage it's out for consultation, and I had a look at the Your Say website yesterday, and I think there was something like 19 comments, and everyone is welcome to have their say, and the whole point is that it collects a diverse array of views. But the bulk of those comments at this stage were from kind of an animal welfare perspective. So I really encourage primary producers to actually get on there and have their say as well. And even within the production sector,
producers know that it's there.
Yeah, well, and
so I got a permit and I didn't know it was there.
Yeah, no. So the changes to the commercial harvest, that it's only been released for public consultation for 2 weeks now, I think. But that's part of the reason I'm here. yourSay.sa.gov.au, and that you'll see that. It doesn't show up on the screen, but on the right hand side, essentially that picture comes up. You can click on it, and you can write a comment or as short or as long as you want.
I'm on the Your Say. I get emails about it, and I got one this morning, and the kangaroo management plan's on that.
Yeah. Really important for people to feedback in if they think it's a good idea. Now, and feel free to contact me. I've got some information sheets, and I can email them out or post them out about how the process would work in a bit more detail for commercial harvest. But essentially on the left is the current commercial harvest map, and you can see that essentially level with the top of the Gulf, there's an east-west line, so the mid-north zone at the moment kind of cuts across to the east above Port Pirie, and south of that we're not in the commercial harvest zone. You see the new map, the mid-north zone comes down further south, and then there's a new Hills and Flurio zone, which will be, there's just a little white cutout, which is essentially metropolitan Adelaide. They're not going to allow commercial harvest of kangaroos there. And it's also, for those who are pushing back into the hills, you can see that some of the Mallee, I think it's called, the Mallee zone actually now pushes in to the Mount Lofty ranges, essentially to the divide. So there's a lot more country to be open. The thing, like, it'll take probably a couple of years, because all of the commercial harvest currently is set up further north, and you've got all of your licensed field processors working further north, well, the bulk of them further north. So what it will take is a few people to set themselves up as field processors down this way, and that will take some time. But it does mean that there's the potential for commercial harvest, for people to make money out of it, for you guys as landholders to have professionals come and shoot roos rather than investing your own time shooting roos, and then that those roos do get used as opposed to being shot and let lie.
So they can have them, I don't need money for them.
Yeah. The margins are pretty tight, so the harvesters, the field processors probably won't be offering to pay. They'll be offering you a service, and then they're pretty tight margins, but they'll be making the money out of the sale. It's a bit more it's a more complex sort of landscape for them to work in. Smaller properties, when they're working in the pastoral zone, one paddock's enough for an entire night's work. Down here, it'll be more complex. They'll need to get more commissions. There'll be more jumping out of ute to the gates. Payoff is there might be a slightly higher density of roos in some areas because there's more feed on offer, and they're also quite closer to the feed to the actual processors, so their costs in terms of transport, refrigerated transport, is lower. I think, running out of time, so I'll just wrap up. Our project through Natural Resources Adelaide Mount Lofty Ranges. So we're looking at providing people with information. We're also looking at have some on-ground outcomes. This is a really quick summary of what we've been doing. We're doing a fair bit of goat control work over the last year. It's essentially all further south of here. We've been doing a little bit of kangaroo management on national parks land, particularly in areas where there are landholders who have permits around the park, because we realise that it's a real issue people who live around parks and the roos live around parks during the day and graze pasture at night. So we're trying to essentially do our bit to manage kangaroo populations at a landscape level. And all of that is a combination of trapping, shooting, and then we're doing a bunch of surveying to work out where animal densities are highest, and therefore where management options would be best concentrated. And I guess I'll leave that one up there for a moment. The regional coordinator, got a field officer working for me. You feel free to contact us, either us at any time, even if you're in Northern and York as an NRM region, we can still have to provide advice. And if you're in Adelaide Mount Lofty Ranges region and you've got a particular issue, we can talk to you about that, and we might be more able to provide on-ground support. And for roo permits, the Environment and Water Department website is the place to go.